It started with silence. A single notification blinked on the cracked screen of an old phone resting beside a half-finished notebook. A sound too small to matter, until it did. Within seconds, Arav's world cracked open. A video he never meant to share was everywhere. Reshared, replayed, ridiculed. He scrolled through hundreds of comments, each one sharper than the last. The words weren't just insults. They were daggers disguised as jokes. Somewhere between laughter and cruelty, millions found pleasure. In every share, in every lull, a piece of him disappeared. His breathing slowed. His phone kept vibrating, mercilessly. The glow of the screen painted his face pale, like a ghost staring back at himself. And in that suffocating moment, the question echoed louder than the notifications. Why do they enjoy watching someone fall? The next morning, the world felt heavier. Arav walked through the school gates, the same place that once felt safe. Now, every glance, every whisper carried judgment. Screens flashed as he passed. Everyone had seen the video. He could hear laughter behind his back, but he kept walking, eyes fixed on the ground. Ria watched from across the courtyard, pretending not to notice. Kabir's gaze met Arav's for a split second. Guilt flickered, then vanished. Sometimes, betrayal doesn't come from words. It comes from silence. By afternoon, Arav stopped checking his phone. The comments had turned from jokes to cruelty. Strangers made memes out of his pain. He sat by the classroom window, watching raindrops trail down the glass. For the first time, he wished to disappear. Not die, just vanish. Somewhere far, where no one could find him. But the world had already pinned him down, frozen him into a symbol of shame. Ria sat in her room that night, scrolling through her notifications. Her video had crossed 1 million views. Each like felt less exciting now, like applause for something she didn't understand. She clicked on the comments. The laughter had turned into cruelty, not just toward Arav, but toward her. "How could you share that?" someone wrote. She stared at the screen, the glow painting her face in pale regret. Late that night, Arav lay in bed staring at the ceiling. The sound of rain mixed with faint phone vibrations. He turned it face down, hoping silence could heal him. But even silence carried echoes. Laughter, judgment, betrayal. He closed his eyes, whispering to himself, words no one else would hear. Outside, the city glowed cold and endless. Inside, a boy's world had already ended. By morning, the internet had already crowned its next victim. Arav's face was everywhere. Memes, parodies, reaction clips. What began as one video had become a global circus. People who didn't even know his name joined the laughter. Ria refreshed her feed and watched the numbers rise. 1 million, then 2. For the first time, she felt a strange chill under the warmth of validation. Every view felt like a heartbeat stolen from someone else. But she smiled for the camera anyway, because the world loves a confident face, not a guilty one. In classrooms, corridors, and canteens, laughter spread faster than news. Students mimicked Arav's voice, his expressions, even his panic. The cruelest part wasn't the words. It was the way they laughed without hate, as if it were just another joke. Kabir watched from a distance, unable to stop them. He wanted to shout, but his voice drowned in the noise. Fear held him. Fear of being next. Somewhere online, strangers began creating pages, fan accounts, parody edits, remixes of Arav's humiliation. The internet didn't sleep. It fed on attention. Ria tried to post something positive, hoping to bury the video under her usual content. But every comment dragged her back. "You made him famous." For the first time, the crowd turned, and the sound of their laughter began to sound like screams. Kabir couldn't sleep. His phone buzzed with group chats filled with jokes about Arav. He stared at the messages, thumb hovering over the Leave Group button. Guilt burned in his chest, but fear whispered louder. Stay quiet. He closed his eyes, seeing flashes of Arav's face. Hurt, alone, betrayed. The laughter echoing through his screen now felt like chains around his throat. By nightfall, the story had escaped the school. News channels began reporting it as the viral scandal. Clips of Arav's face played on repeat with dramatic background music. Experts debated teenage morality, while audiences commented with laughing emojis. Arav sat on his bed, watching his life turned into a headline. He wanted to scream, but even his silence was trending. The noise never stopped. Arav muted every app, but the silence that followed was worse. It echoed with memories of laughter. Every corner of the internet had his face. Every scroll was a reminder. He stopped going to school. His room became his whole world, walls closing in tighter each day. His mother knocked sometimes, her voice trembling, but he always said, "I'm fine." The truth was buried somewhere beneath the glow of a dead screen. Mrs. Mehta stood outside the door, listening to the stillness. Mothers can feel pain without seeing it. She pressed her ear against the wood, hearing faint sobs buried under forced silence. When she entered, Arav quickly wiped his face, pretending to yawn. She smiled softly, pretending to believe him. Both carried their lies like masks, hers of comfort, his of strength. Between them, a silence grew too wide to cross. Ria couldn't sleep either. Her followers had begun turning against her, the same ones who once called her queen. Every notification now carried hate. "You ruined his life," they wrote. She wanted to apologize. To explain it wasn't meant to hurt anyone. But apologies don't go viral. She scrolled through old photos of her and Arav from years ago, back when friendship wasn't filtered through likes. Her tears fell silently on the phone screen. Kabir avoided looking at his phone. Every meme, every cruel edit reminded him of what he hadn't done. He should have stopped them, should have spoken up. But he hadn't, and now the silence burned like guilt. When he finally texted Arav, the message stayed unread. Minutes turned to hours, hours into a haunting realization. Sometimes "I'm sorry" comes too late to matter. That night, Arav stood by his window, the city lights below blurring into streaks. He wondered if people ever realized what they destroy when they laugh. The noise had taken everything. His voice, his peace, his sense of self. He whispered into the darkness, not for forgiveness, not for pity, but for silence. Somewhere deep inside, he hoped that one day, the world would stop turning pain into entertainment. Days passed, but the noise never faded. Arav's name still floated through the digital wind, sometimes in memes, sometimes in pity posts. Kabir walked through school corridors that now felt haunted by laughter. Every whisper, every smirk reminded him of what he hadn't done. He wanted to tell everyone to stop, but the moment had already slipped away. Guilt doesn't shout, it whispers softly, until it becomes the only sound you hear. That evening, Kabir opened his old chat with Arav. Their last message thread was still there, full of jokes and plans that would never happen again. He scrolled upward, trying to remember the moment when friendship turned into silence. It wasn't one message or one mistake. It was every time he looked away, every time he laughed when he should have spoken. The world had turned cruel, and he had stayed quiet. Ria posted an apology. A long caption, a few tears on camera, and soft music playing behind her voice. People flooded the comments, some forgave her, most didn't. To the internet, forgiveness was entertainment too. Kabir watched the video, anger rising in his chest. He wasn't angry at her alone. He was angry at himself, at everyone who turned a boy's pain into content. Because now, the world wasn't laughing at Arav. It was dissecting him. Arav's mother sat in the principal's office, listening to words that felt rehearsed. Awareness, cyber ethics, policy change. None of it mattered. Her son's absence had become a lesson for others. a talking point for meetings. As she walked through the empty hallway afterward, she felt the weight of unseen eyes, not of people, but of screens. They had all watched him fall, and now they watched her survive. Kabir stood before Arev's empty seat in class. The chair had been left untouched, a silent memorial that no one mentioned anymore. He placed his phone on the desk, playing the recording Arav had once sent. Laughter, soft and innocent. The sound filled the room, echoing through walls that had witnessed too much cruelty. He realized then, silence isn't peace, it's the sound of guilt, learning how to breathe. Ria's apology didn't heal anything. Instead, it made her the next target. The same crowd that once praised her now tore her apart. Fake tears, they wrote. She just wants attention. She scrolled through the hate, realizing how fast love turns to disgust online. The comments blurred together until they stopped being words. They became noise. For the first time, she understood what Arev must have felt. That sinking, voiceless feeling of being devoured by people who only came to watch you break. By the next morning, Ria stopped posting. She sat staring at the blank Create Post screen, realizing how silence felt heavier than 1,000 comments. She searched for Arev's account, but it was gone. Deleted, erased, like he never existed. Still, his ghost lived in hashtags, in threads, in memes that refused to die. For the first time, she didn't see numbers or views. She saw a person the world forgot to protect. Kabir finally spoke, not in anger, but in truth. He stood before the class and told them what no one wanted to hear. How every share, every laugh, every "let's just a joke" built a wall that trapped Arev inside it. The room fell silent, faces turning away. For once, guilt wasn't invisible. It had a face, a sound, a trembling voice. And in that silence, something inside Ria broke. Not out of shame, but the need to make things right. That night, Ria opened her camera again. Not to entertain, not to cry, but to speak. This time, she didn't use filters or background music. Her voice trembled as she talked about Arev, about cruelty, about how easy it is to forget that every screen hides a real person. "We didn't just ruin his name," she said softly. "We ruined his peace." And for the first time, the internet listened, not out of curiosity, but out of quiet, collective guilt. Her video spread not like the first one, but differently. People didn't laugh this time. They shared it quietly, as if ashamed. Comments changed from mockery to reflection. Kabir reposted it with just one caption. He deserved better. Even Mrs. Mehta saw it, tears slipping down her tired cheeks. Somewhere in the endless scroll of the internet, Arev's silence finally spoke louder than the noise. The world moved on. New trends, new scandals, new names to mock. Arev's story faded from the headlines like it had never happened. But for those who had lived it, the silence stayed. Kabir walked past the same corridor where laughter once echoed, now empty, except for his memories. Sometimes he could still hear it faintly. Not the laughter, but the moment it stopped. Because silence isn't peace. It's what's left behind when the noise forgets. Ria had stopped making content. The ring light gathered dust in the corner of her room. She didn't delete her accounts, but she no longer chased attention. Sometimes she scrolled through old videos and felt a dull ache in her chest, a mix of regret and relief. The world she built on validation had collapsed, but in its ruins, she found honesty. And honesty, she learned, doesn't get millions of views. Just peace. Mrs. Mehta returned to her daily routines, though nothing felt the same. She cooked, she cleaned, she smiled at neighbors, but every small sound, a phone buzz, a news alert, made her heart skip. She didn't hate the world anymore, she just couldn't trust it. Every screen looked like a doorway to pain. Yet at night, when she lit the small lamp by Arav's photo, she whispered a promise to keep his story alive in kindness, not in tragedy. Kabir sat at a cafe window one afternoon, watching people scroll on their phones, laughing, reacting, living through screens. He realized that nothing had changed. The world still craved the next fall, the next humiliation. But maybe change doesn't start with the world. Maybe it starts with one person deciding not to laugh. He smiled faintly, sipping his coffee, hoping that silence, this time, could mean empathy. At night, the city buzzed with life. Bright, loud, endless. Somewhere in that glow, Arav's name still existed, buried deep in old comments, forgotten by most. But maybe that's how healing begins. Not when people remember you, but when they stop hurting you. The storm had passed. The scars would stay, and in the silence that followed, the question still lingered. How loud can silence feel when the world has stopped laughing? Months passed. The world forgot, as it always does. But in the quiet corners where memory lingers, the story still breathed. Kabir returned to the old classroom, its walls now repainted, desks rearranged. Yet, the air carried traces of something unspoken. He sat where Arav once did, running his fingers along the scratched wood. It wasn't guilt anymore, it was memory. Because some stories never end. They simply turn into lessons. Ria arrived later that day, her steps hesitant, as if walking through a place that belonged to ghosts. She didn't wear makeup, didn't carry her phone. She just stood by the window where Arav once sat, watching the sunlight scatter across empty desks. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Not to the world, not to the camera, but to the silence. And for the first time, her words didn't need an audience to matter. The school held an assembly in Arav's name, not a tribute, but a promise. Teachers spoke of empathy. Students listened in uneasy silence. No one laughed. The same hall that once echoed with gossip now felt sacred. Kabir looked around at faces he once saw laughing. They weren't cruel anymore, just human. Maybe people don't change overnight, but sometimes one story can make them stop and think before they scroll again. That evening, Ria and Kabir walked home together for the first time in months. No words were needed. The road was quiet, the sky painted in orange and violet. They stopped by the small bridge overlooking the city lights. "Do you think he'd forgive us?" Ria asked. Kabir looked ahead and whispered, "Maybe he already has." The wind carried their silence, blending it into the hum of the city. A silence that no longer hurt, but healed. Later that night, the school projector flickered on by itself. Arav's last video, the one no one had seen, played softly. His voice was calm, honest. "Be kind," he said. "We're all fighting battles no one sees." The clip ended with his faint smile. The classroom fell silent again, but this time it was a silence that spoke. Because some storms don't destroy. They cleanse. And in that stillness, a question lingered like a heartbeat. Why do we love watching others fall, when we're all just trying to stand?